Good evening, and welcome to tonight's briefing into the current climate of our college campuses in Virginia. On behalf of the JCRC of Greater Washington, the Jewish Federation of Tidewater, the Jewish Federation of Richmond, and the United Jewish Community of the Virginia Peninsula, thank you for joining us tonight. We are inspired to see hundreds of individuals joining us on the call this evening. Your presence shows how deeply you care about vibrant Jewish life on campus. In a few short nights, we will gather around Seder tables and be reminded that in every generation, each Jew should regard themselves as if they personally came out of Egypt. This year, these words in the Haggadah take on new meaning and perhaps warn us that each generation will face its own moment of crisis, its own Exodus moment, during which we will be required to summon the vision and courage to protect our families and the Jewish people. In this moment, when nearly 3/4 of Jewish college students have experienced or seen anti-Semitism since the start of the school year, this idea of an Exodus moment feels real. Since October 7th, we have seen campuses become the front lines in a new type of battle. And even in the face of these challenging circumstances on campus, Jewish students have sought out community and shown up for one another. And our Jewish on-campus professionals have shown virtually unending capacity to support their students. 1 minute comforting a student in distress, the next planning a program full of joy. 1 minute calming a concerned parent, the next advocating on behalf of Jewish students with the school administrator. Let me pause and express gratitude for all who support this essential work. Tonight, we will hear from a diversity of local and national voices about their experiences supporting, protecting, and empowering Jewish students on Virginia campuses today. As you listen to their presentations and have a question, please type your question in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We will try to answer as many of your questions as we can. And now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Carrie Reifel, the Director of Safety and Security for Hillel International.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you guys can all hear me. As he just mentioned, I am the new Director of Safety and Security for Hillel International. I am assigned basically or detailed to Hillel International through SCN, Secure Community Network, which is the official safety and security organization for the Jewish community in North America. We're a pretty large organization. If you're not familiar with us, we're all over the country. We have at least 75 plus law enforcement personnel, retired law enforcement that work for our organization. We all come from varying backgrounds. I'm retired from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have chiefs of police. We have other, federal agencies, local sheriff's departments, but just a lot of law enforcement. My background real quick, just to give you guys some context, I worked for the Bureau for about 25 years. I worked all types of violations, violent crime, gangs, drugs, child exploitation, human trafficking, etc., and ultimately became a profiler for the Bureau. And what I ended up specializing in was threat assessment, threat management. So in this world, you think about the active shooter or mass shootings, one of my specialties is assessing someone who's on the pathway to violence and working on de-escalating or getting that individual off the pathway. So behavioral specialist is my background. I was not going to leave the FBI unless I had something that was mission oriented, and the Hillel International position started to become available. And it's interesting. I signed my contract 3 days before October 7th. So I did not know what was coming, but I'm grateful that I'm in the position I'm in, that I can actually do the work I'm doing. Yes, it's insanely busy on college campuses, but I'm grateful that I'm in the place to do the work and to help the community. So it's been crazy, it's been hectic, and like I said, very busy, but good work in helping students all over the country and our Hillel directors as well. So what I want to talk just a little bit about, briefly overview campus life. What does it look like across the country right now? And in all reality, it just depends on the campus. It depends on what part of the country. So what we've seen from a safety perspective, that there is kind of what I would call a trickle-down effect that starts with the administration on college campuses. And if the administration seems to be following their code of conduct or their policies and procedures, and they're very clear on what that is, then the local law enforcement or campus police are in the same position, and they are very clear on what their roles are. And that makes everything a lot easier. Everyone knows kind of their lane, what's allowed, what's not allowed. The campuses where I see challenges are where there's less direction, less clear direction. It's more gray. It's more administrators kind of wanting to stay in the middle and not really take a stand or enforce what's already in place because they don't want to be perceived as choosing sides, so to speak. Well, that trickles down to local law enforcement or campus police, who then end up in another position where they're like, do we or do we not? And then obviously that impacts the safety of our students. So top down, it's the best way to describe it. I've probably been to about 15 Hillels at this point and all over the country. And that is the common theme. When I sit down with campus police, they literally look at me and say, if I have clear direction from the administrators, I enforce it and everything goes the way it's supposed to go. If it's not clear, then it doesn't go that way. So that's kind of an overview. I'm going to turn it over and we'll come back for some from Q&A. But one thing I will say real quick, because we do track all of the complaints and all the incidents on campuses, the number one incident or the number one complaint that is happening right now is actually in classroom settings. It is faculty, it is staff, it is in that environment where things are not getting addressed. And then it trickles down to, there's of course vandalism and there's, verbal harassment and other things all the way down to physical assaults. But the number one complaint that we're getting and seeing across the country is faculty allowing things to take place in classroom settings that they shouldn't be allowing. So that's just an overview of what we see on campuses right now. But we can certainly talk more about this as we go along and answer some questions. I can't see everyone, so I'm not sure if Mark is on or who is next. So I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I want to pass it along.
You're actually going to pass it to me. Thank you so much for that. It was really insightful. I really appreciated learning a little bit more about all of the amazing things that you're doing with SCAN. We're so grateful for everything that you and all of your partners do for us to keep us safe in our communities. I'm Amy Milligan. I'm the director of the Institute for Jewish Studies and Interfaith Understanding at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. And I'm going to be moderating some of our discussion with our panel tonight. If you know me, which some of you do and some of you don't, you'll know that something that's really important to me is that I really like to foreground student voices in our conversations. And so we have some really great Hillel professionals that are going to be speaking with us, as well as some others as part of our panel. But I want to make sure that we start with our student representative and our student voice tonight for two reasons. One, because sometimes non-students monopolize the conversation. We know that. And also because our Hillel student leaders often are very, very busy because they're high achieving students. And the student who is with us tonight actually has to dash off to another commitment towards the end of our program because she is a high achieving student and has something else that she has to do. So we're going to jump right into our conversation with Kiara Schneiderman, who is joining us from Virginia Tech. And I'm wondering if you would like to tell us a little bit about yourself by way of introduction, and then maybe we can just dialogue a little bit about your experience. I've got a couple questions for you too.
Yes, thank you so much. Hi, my name is Kira. I haven't done anything like this, but I am the student body president of Virginia Tech. I won this position a year ago at the end of my sophomore year before October 7th. And then I recently won re-election for my senior year. So, and I had a lot of protesters trying to get me out, but I won by a lot. So Virginia Tech has now had a Jewish student body president going on 2 years. I was the president of the Jewish Student Union before I ever ran for president. I would say my administration and my team has been very supportive of me. Still protests and things that happen, but I have a lot of support. And I mean, there's not a lot of other Jewish student body presidents right now. I know one other one I've talked to, but it's a difficult position to be in for me, but like I want to be a politician. Like I want to hold public office, and I feel like I'm definitely experiencing that right now.
Yeah, those are some really big things for you to navigate, right? Especially as a student leader on a campus during a tumultuous time. You know, what has it been like? Just trying to navigate all of that as a Jewish student in a campus climate. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when October 7th originally happened, then what I told my cabinet and my Senate was that it is the job of the student government to support all 30,000 undergraduate students, and I didn't believe that we should take a stance in the matter. Now, I, as an individual, am very much a Zionist, but I was like, I represent everyone, and I shouldn't exclude anyone in my advocacy. And I said that to my Senate in October, and everything was fine. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, I respect you so much because you're Jewish. And like I did Onward last summer, so I lived in Israel last summer for 2 months, and everything was great. Now, the president of the Students for Peace and Justice club at my school is on my cabinet. She is one of my vice presidents. And I think there's a lot of people in her head right now telling her what to do. Basically, about a month or two ago, she went up during her cabinet report and she read a divestment statement without talking to me, without talking to anyone else. And that was kind of the beginning of a lot of this. And I shut it down. I didn't even come for a vote. I just immediately shut it down on its face. So that wasn't that one was fine. Then the election happened, and I ran against one other guy, and he made his entire platform about Palestine. He is Hispanic. He had nothing to do with the conflict, but he made his entire platform about essentially not being me. And students made posts about me, calling me a big dirty Zionist. And it's just said a bunch of stuff. I don't have any names or anything, but it happened. And again, I still won. I didn't talk about it. I didn't fall into identity politics. I would say most students at Virginia Tech don't really know much about student government. So I just went to sororities and I went to the groups and I just talked about sexual violence prevention and parking and all the things that everyone cares about. And that worked. And then at my Senate meetings are open to the public. So since I've won, I feel like it's gotten worse. I just get a lot of protesters and they come and they can't really talk during the meeting, but we have like a public forum section at the end. So they follow the rules, but they will come up and they will scream a lot of like pro Hamas sentiment in the room. And like, I can't, if I silence them, then they'll say I'm freedom of speech. So I kind of just have to sit there and have a straight face, which I do. I just sit there stone cold and I have to just let them come and talk. And they haven't achieved anything because I just let them talk and then nothing happens. So they're wasting their own time. There's that. Recently they've written a resolution calling for a ceasefire, which I'm also not putting on the agenda because it doesn't fall within the scope of student government. It is not representative of all students. It is not about student experience. My charge and my scope is Virginia Tech students on campus. I want to help pro-Palestine students. If they're mourning or whatever, there's things the Dean of Students office can do, but I'm not going to do anything that isn't representative. But I'm getting a lot of heat for that, even though I feel like I've given up a lot of myself to support people who disagree with me. Like I really have tried to put my personal feelings aside to help them. They don't really care. They just want a explicitly pro-Palestine statement, and that's it. So I have my last Senate meeting of the year this upcoming Tuesday. So I'm excited that it's the last one, but I'm also nervous. I think they're going to freak out because I'm not putting this on the agenda. Like we are not voting on it, but they're going to bring it up. So I'm going to have to deal with a lot of screaming and hate at this Senate meeting. But then after that, I think that's it. That's all we have to do for the school year. And then hopefully people will chill out over the summer.
I'm just struck as you're speaking. I'm hearing so many things about the ways that you've stepped forward as a leader and taken the high road in so many ways and sacrificed so much as a leader to really try to step into this role to care for your whole campus community, recognizing that, as student senate president, your role is to represent your whole student body. And I think that that's just so commendable. And that's what leaders do, right? They really try to lead in this very encompassing way. And it's hard. And I think that all of us can really recognize that in you. But I also think that college students deserve to be college students, and it's really hard what you've been through this year. And I want to name that for you. I'm sure others are also doing that, but it's not a normal experience to have to be yelled at in college spaces, and to take in that kind of hate as a college student and to have to always take the high road. Um, and I hate that for you. And I know that that seems like a really silly thing to say on a call this large, but just from me to you, I just want to like hold that space because it's hard. It's really
Mhm.
hard.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I feel like my skin has gotten a lot thicker. Like I think, and I got yelled at a little bit in December, and I think in December when anyone said anything, I would cry immediately. But now it's kind of sad, but I've become numb to it because it just happened so much that I can feel like I can sit in whatever, and I like well, I don't feel anything anymore. Which again, it's like sad, but also again, I want to be a politician. Like this is so in some ways, I'm like I feel like I tell myself that I'm like preparing for that.
Right. Yeah. No, I think you're really, and you're inspiring other students on your campus too, right? And across the Commonwealth by doing this. I'm wondering as you're thinking about this, right? As you're in this role for your whole university, but you're also really inspiring so many other Jewish students. Is there advice that you would give to the Jewish students who might be on this call or in the Commonwealth, who might not be in leadership positions like yours? Is there thinking about how to navigate this? What would you tell them about how to navigate climates like this as they're thinking about it?
Mhm. Um, I think it's hard because a lot of these protesters have a one-track mind and they aren't willing to have a dialogue, but that not every single person, that I found that for and it's hard. It's hard to separate your emotions from your work and to um, sit down with people who disagree with you. But I think that is how you build bridges and that's how you make things better on campus. And it's slow. Like it's not, you're not going to see immediate progress, but I have relationships with a couple of pro-Palestine students, and it's also much easier when you sit down with them one-on-one. When they're in like a group setting, it's very much like mob mentality. Like they get that like validation almost when they're all in a group, and they say whatever. But if you are like, I want to get coffee with you, just you, or like I want to hear, tell me why you feel this way. And it's hard, but that is how you really get to people. And then people are so much more respectful to me when I talk to them one on one. In the group setting, then they will call me stupid and they'll hurl personal insults and whatnot. But when I talk to them one on one, then it's a very different conversation. And through this, I've gained a lot of respect from my cabinet. So I have vice presidents, and a lot of them aren't Jewish. And, outside of there's the president of SPJP, but a few Senate meetings ago, I had it was right after the election, and it was like I think it was the first like crazy Senate meeting that I had, and three of my vice presidents, my non-Jewish vice presidents, went up to me and they said, "Kira, let us take this for you." They were like, "Let us take the heat." I'm an RA. I live on campus. They were like, "We don't want you to talk." We were like, "Let us come up and we are going to explain to the Senate why this resolution is bad, and just let us do it entirely." They were like, "Let us take the heat." And that was huge. I never expected I would have non-Jewish people I felt like more upset about the conflict than I was. And they took a significant, I'm still getting heat. I feel like I'm getting more heat than them, but that night they went up and they said everything that I wanted to say, but they said it. And I didn't tell them to do it at all. And that was huge. And it was just from being around me and just hearing about my experience. And then the last thing I've done is I've given out, I don't know if y'all have heard or seen Noah Tishby's book on Israel, but I read that book like a year or two ago. And before I read that book, I didn't know anything about Israel. Like I'm from rural North Carolina. I knew nothing about Israel. And that book honestly changed my mind. I wasn't anti-Israel before, but I just didn't know anything. And I read that book and it really changed how I thought about things. So in my room, I have like at least 10 copies of the book and I give it out. I give it to students. And it's great because I can just give them the book and I can say nothing. I can just be like, read this book. And one of my vice presidents did read the book. And then with university administration, they have money of their own, but they'll buy the book. I've gotten a lot. I got my university president to read the book. I just emailed him because, he responds to me as the student body president. I was like, read this book in October. And he did. And not only did he read it, but he directly quoted it in the meeting to our board, like our board of visitors that's higher than him. So just that book recommendation alone has had huge impact. And it requires very little effort on your part because you don't have to do anything. You just hand them the book and that's it. You don't have to say much.
I love that. That's such a great recommendation. And I'm also going to give a little plug that for some of our folks here, it's also available on Spotify if you have a paid account that you can listen to it there as well. Um, you've given us so much to think about, and I want to loop in our other Hillel directors because I think that they will really vibe with some of the things that you've shared. Because you've had such great ideas, and I know that they've got really similar ideas. I'm wondering if they would like to introduce themselves and join in the conversation with us. Daniel, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. My name is Daniel Novick. I'm the executive director at the Hillel at George Mason University in Fairfax. I'm a fifth generation Virginian. Many of you have heard that. But I share that on this call because as our federations and our JCRCs in the Commonwealth know, and have heard me say before this year, never before have I felt more connected with the entire Jewish community of Virginia than this year. We feel the support, we feel the love, we feel the anger and the grief, we feel it all. And I'm just so grateful that the JCRCs and the federations have put together this call tonight to be in conversation. So I just wanted to thank you all. Carrie, you're a rock star. Oh my gosh. I'll say something and then Truman, you should take over and introduce yourself, but I'm sure we can continue this conversation. Hillel's work is all about relationship building, right? And I think we'll talk about our relationships with the university administrations and what that means for our work on campus and not. But Kiara, the fact that you are in relationship with the president, you've got him to read the book, like I'm sure Truman has stories of how he's been in a relationship with the UVA administration. I have stories too. So I think that's a common thread that we can maybe talk on, but I'm just inspired by what you said and I just want to thank you. Truman, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Truman Brody Boyd. I am one of the co-managing directors of the Brody Jewish Center right now. My other co-managing director, Annie Weinberg, has been at UVA Hillel since we both graduated together in 2019, and then I rejoined the team 2 years ago as our director of development. And following our executive directors taking a new gig with Hillel International, Annie and I have been steering the ship since January and have been loving the opportunity to support our students through this difficult time. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you tonight, to be able to be in conversation with these wonderful people sharing the screen with me. And definitely want to echo Daniel's sentiments, both in gratitude for our Jewish community across Virginia. And also, Kiara, you've been doing amazing work. I hear about it from my friends at Virginia Tech Hillel. So it's wonderful to get to meet you over Zoom at least. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
As we're kind of coming together here, all of us, we've just heard a little bit about some experiences at Virginia Tech. We've heard about sort of a larger picture nationally. I'm wondering, we're all obviously really aware about how anti-Semitism is surging on college campuses since October 7th. I'm wondering if you two would like to talk a little bit about what the experiences have been like on your campuses, and then also more specifically just how your Hillels have been interacting and supporting Jewish students.
I want to quickly say I have to go in like 2 minutes because I have a meeting at 8. But I'm sure my email can be shared, or like if I'll talk to anyone. You just reach out to me and talk. But yeah, you can continue with the question.
No, that'd be great. We really appreciate that. And we're so glad that you could be here with us. I think that I'm going to speak on behalf of the group, but I think anytime we can hear from students, that's really the lifeblood of the work that we're doing and where we're focused. And I think that it brings joy to all of us, and we can just see how important the work that you're doing is.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna head to my other meeting, but email me if you want anything. Bye.
Truman, why don't you go for it?
Oh, dang. I was going to say, because you went first in introducing, you had to lead with all the other questions. Oh, you beat me to it. Okay. Smooth. Yeah. So look, it's a hard time to be a Jewish student on a college campus right now. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's difficult. It's challenging. What we're hearing from our students here at UVA is that they're feeling isolated. right? They're feeling isolated in their classrooms, in their friend groups, in their clubs and organizations, their IM sports, whatever, like those groups that they could formally rely on for steady, close, trusting relationships. They're finding less of that these days. And they're also feeling that in the classroom as well, right? We've had some instances of professors promoting political activities or the divestment referendum that we had, that kind of thing. And so that's been difficult for our students to see and hear about. And then there have been, isolated incidents that we track very, very closely and respond to as immediately as we can in terms of direct anti-Semitism. But we're very thankful that it has been much more limited at UVA than what we're seeing from some of our peer institutions, right? We look at other large public flagship state universities across the country. We aspirationally look at the Ivy Leagues in terms of our academic excellence and that kind of thing. And so we compare with their Hillels and Jewish communities as well. And so we're thankful that here on grounds, it's a less openly tenuous environment for our students, which we're very thankful for. And I think we'll go into depth about some of the other aspects of your question later. But as a broad overview, it's like I said, it's hard to be Jewish on campus right now. It's hard to be Jewish on UVA's grounds. And we're very thankful that we can provide them a thriving community.
I'll echo that. I mean, I certainly agree. George Mason University, for those who don't know, is the largest public university in Virginia. There's about 30,000 undergraduates and another 10-ish plus thousand graduate students. So it's a large system. And our Jewish students are a small part of that, about 1,000 of them. So they feel alone in the larger ecosystem. They don't feel alone in terms of their about the Jewish community. They certainly feel supported by the Jewish community. But what they see on social media, like, really impacts their emotional well-being, their mental health. Walking past protests, even though, for a majority of my Jewish students at Mason don't feel physical, they don't feel like their physical safety is at risk. They do feel it, and it's constantly on their mind. And they're college students, right? They're there to learn, they're there to meet people, and so that has certainly been a difficult aspect of this. There's also a lot of our, college students who are essentially forced to learn about Israel for the first time under this context. They wanted to explore and learn about Israel, but they're put on, they're spotlighted, right? They're saying their roommates, their dorm mates, their classmates are all asking them, "Oh, what do you think about Israel?" Which obviously is a trope or a form of anti-Semitism that they are experiencing these days. But it's hard for them for those who don't have that background, to catch up in real time. And so we're facing that a lot in what we're experiencing. What I'll say also is, I'm looking at, my notes here. That's why I'm looking that way. But, I think a huge challenge that our Jewish students are caught up in is a larger challenge than simply like, is a protest allowed or not, or what does it feel like to walk by that? As public institutions in the Commonwealth, there's a lot at play in terms of free speech, hate speech, as many of you know. There are difficulties in interpreting law. Like, I feel like I've become a lawyer, a politician, a rabbi, a Hillel director all at once in the past few months, mainly because it has become so complicated. And I think our students are feeling that that they are just like lost in the mess almost of people or systems trying to figure out how to respond in the moment, how to deal with code of conducts and policies with law and all that stuff. So that's kind of what we're experiencing a little bit at Mason. Those of you might have seen that last week there was the Student Senate passed a resolution in support of BDS. It wasn't a BDS resolution calling for the university to divest. It was a resolution supporting exploring BDS and implementing its policies within the student government. But in terms of anti-Semitism and in terms of what it meant for Jewish students at Mason specifically, some of the senators in favor of this specific resolution said that they reached out to Jewish students and Hillel and Chabad and our Israel Student Association wanting to be in conversation about it, and no one responded. And that is blatantly 100% false. All three organizations have not done that. So there, in my opinion, has become a way that some of these student senators are putting this on Jewish students. Oh, they're not coming to the table. And our students are very upset about that currently right now. And we're trying to address that in real time.
I'm actually wondering if we could maybe linger on that topic for just another moment. What are the implications of some of these BDS referendums for Jewish students on your campus, on our campuses, on other campuses? What has that kind of played out to look like? What have your experiences been?
I don't know I don't know if this is 100% factual, but it feels like it is. So if someone wants to correct me, they can. But I don't know of a single university that has said, "Up, our student government passed a BDS resolution or referendum. We're going to follow it." Maybe there's one, I don't know. But for the most part, when these resolutions are passed or these referendum are voted upon, the universities don't follow it. At George Mason University, our university administration has said that if the Senate sends them something, they're not going to listen. That the Student Senate does not speak for the university or the university administration. So the president has come out pretty strong in that. He spoke at our students, they call it a spring soiree. It's like a gala, but for students, like I call it Gala Light. So he was there on Sunday night and he spoke and he said that directly to 100 people. So the implications of BDS, in my opinion, is simply to create hate and division on campus. It is to make Jewish students feel uncomfortable, pro-Israel students uncomfortable. It is, and even though the students who bring it to the table say that it's not anti-Semitic and that they're not trying to be anti-Semitic, the fact is that it causes anti-Semitism on campus. There's data report after data report that shows it. And the case from George Mason University this past week just simply is another data point there that they're using BDS to silence Jewish voices. They did not bring Jewish voices or pro-Israel voices to the table. And so that's the biggest implication, in my opinion, that BDS type of resolutions referendum create on campus.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Like Daniel said, there's very concrete and long-standing statistical analysis essentially of rates of anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses that spike after BDS resolutions are passed or even brought up, frankly, right? So I want to give a shout out to our students who argued very maturely and powerfully against a BDS referendum that came through the University of Virginia here last month in March before spring break. The process was a little different here at UVA because it's UVA and they have to be special, of course, which is why I call it grounds instead of campus. But so the BDS referendum was a student vote throughout the entire spring election cycle. So instead of a BDS resolution that came up in student government, which was what Daniel was talking about and what Kiara mentioned happening at Virginia Tech, these students essentially petitioned to have a BDS referendum added to the spring election cycle. It was mailed out to all 25,000 students at the university, graduate, undergraduate. I'm a grad student. I got this in my inbox, right? And so we felt that that was deeply problematic and concerning. And like Daniel said, it creates an environment that isolates, frustrates, and exposes our Jewish students, right? It ostracizes them from their peers, especially so when we saw limited instances of faculty promoting it or allowing students to promote it in their classroom, which is directly in violation of the spring election rules that were laid out by the university's Student Board of Elections. And so I'm a little jealous of George Mason and their president's strong support for their Jewish students and their strong stance against BDS. We did have our president of the university, President Jim Ryan, come out and say that he would have not voted in favor of this BDS resolution after it had passed already, with 30% of the student body voting in general, and then 60% of that 30% voting in favor. So he came out and said at the Board of Visitors, which is our Board of Governors meeting, that he would have voted no for it. I would have liked to, and we issued a statement afterwards as a staff and as a center and as a Hillel, essentially calling on the university to put out a statement in support of its Jewish community and denouncing this isolating and frustrating and anti-Semitic referendum. Right, this referendum included statements in it that saying Israel has been an occupier and a colonizer for over 100 years. Right, delegitimizing the existence of a Jewish state in our ancestral homeland, which for us is anti-Israel and spills into anti-Semitism. So we would have liked to see a stronger response there, and we continue to make that point clear to the university as well. I can tell you that us as co-managing directors have been continuing to advocate on that point with the university. So, but the university has come out and said, like Daniel mentioned at George Mason, it's the same story, right? It's completely non-actionable. The university looks at it and goes, interesting petition. Thank you for your thoughts. Moving on. So they don't act on it. University's investment portfolio will never act on outside influence for the most part in that form. And so it's just it's been a really disappointing way to see our Jewish students be isolated further from their peers.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a way of creating a lot of noise, right? That can take up a lot of space and take up a lot of energy. Daniel, I was really struck by the thing that you said, where it's like we've had to become, knowledgeable about policy, about law. We had to become rabbis and spiritual guides and mentors and teachers and friends and all of these things sort of all bundled into one person in our roles in ways that we've never been called on before. And I was kind of trying to pull from different threads of what you're saying and keep an eye on the chat. And Truman, what you just said about the importance of administration and all of this really rang true for me as well. Also in seeing some of the questions that are coming in the chat, thinking about what Carrie shared as well, because one of the questions that came in is actually asking, have Hillel directors had to make demands, or have they to administrators about things like including mental health support services to Jewish students, to get trained mental health professionals who are sensitive to their concerns, or have there been other special asks that have been made to the administration, or are there other ways that in your roles you've approached administration outside of things like BDS to advocate for Jewish students, and what has that looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an ongoing conversation since October 7th, right? And it's manifested itself in a variety of different ways. So a big focus of our Hillel, as is with many Hillels, as you mentioned at the start, Amy, is that we focus on student empowerment, right? Focusing and listening to student voices. And so a lot of it has been translating what our students are telling us they want to see from administration, what they're asking for, looking for, what they need. And we're taking that and providing it to the university and imploring them to support us in those ways that they can. And they have responded really positively to a lot of those requests, right? So immediately following October 7th, they kind of threw the rule book out of the window in terms of space reservations, right? And got us a central space in the middle of University of Virginia's grounds in order for our students to run a vigil in honor of the lives lost and to pray for peace for everyone involved in this awful conflict. So they held that just days after October 7th. It was an incredibly beautiful event. The university provided the space, the security, the microphones, the lights, all that stuff, and they moved heaven and earth to make that happen. They also have, at our request, immediately responded and upped security patrols of our building, right? We work, I know Carrie was on here earlier, but we work really closely with the Secure Communities Network. And so one of the things that we did in the immediate aftermath of October 7th and an anticipated rise in, divisive rhetoric on grounds was upping our security patrols. So now we often have UVA police or UVA security that we get to wave to as we leave the office, and we're thankful for their presence here. And then another aspect in which I think UVA can be stronger, right, is coming out with vocal and visible support for the Jewish community at times where we feel that we are fighting an uphill battle or feeling a little more isolated than we should. And, at any point, right, It shouldn't happen at all. And when we are feeling that and when we're hearing that from students, it isn't acceptable, and the university can play a role in fixing that. So one other place where the university has been helpful, and this is something that we have directly asked them and encouraged them and supported them in doing, is holding events where they bring experts in the field out, right? UVA has wonderful resources and prestige in order to get great speakers like that. So just a couple of weeks ago, they held a wonderful panel discussion with several Palestinian speakers, several Israeli speakers from a variety of political backgrounds and emotions, right? And had a wonderful talk with them, moderated by a Jewish American professor. And then they had a reception at President Ryan's house where, like, I was able to attend, and I saw groups of the students that I work with every day, Jewish students, having beautiful, difficult, meaningful conversations with Palestinian peers, with pro-Palestinian peers, right? Or people that just came to the event to learn more. So we're thankful for their support in that regard, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with them in partnership.
I really appreciate that, Truman. I'm wondering actually if this might be a great point for us to pull Carrie back in, because I think that we're kind of skirting around some of our security conversation, and I think that's something that I think all three of us probably think a lot about, and I'm guessing a lot of the parents in the room are thinking about too, because it's certainly, I think Jews in general are thinking about it, if we're being honest. And I know a lot of the questions that are coming in are about this, particularly about whether Jews are afraid to speak out on campus, what is happening to Jewish students if they've spoken up in support of Israel. What are our security concerns? What does that look like on campus? What are we doing to keep our students safe? I'm throwing all of these things just sort of out for us to kind of think about together as a group, because I think it looks different for all of us on our campuses. And, Carrie, you really have, your fingers right on this for us and have probably the best sense of what it looks like. But maybe we can just be in conversation together as a group. What is it looking like these days for us? How are we keeping our students safe? And another question that came in is, do Jews even feel safe to show up and speak out at these counter protests? And to what extent can we actually keep our Jewish students safe?
Yeah, all very great questions, all very hard questions. What I will say, and I know there's some things in the chat I can address too as I go through this, but the biggest thing, let's start with physical security. One thing that I focus on all over the country is making sure if there are events that are going to happen, how do we make sure those events are safe and secure? What do we need to do? Do we need to hire extra security or security at all? Sometimes it's, do we need to move this event? Do we need to move it off campus? Do we need to move it to a Hillel if the Hillel isn't in the middle of campus? So these are all decisions that get made real time, depending on what it looks like on that very specific campus. We at SCN, we monitor social media really closely. We have an Intel command center, if you will, that we geofence every event, wherever it is, anywhere in the country, and make sure that if we see chatter in any way that could be concerning or that makes us think, okay, we need to do something different to make sure that we're all safe at this event, then we address it immediately. I'm in constant contact with the Hillel directors and discussing, hey, here's what it looks like right now on my campus. What do you think? Should we cancel this event? That's the last thing I ever want to recommend is canceling an event. I don't agree with doing that. I agree with finding a way to make it safer, and then finding a way to make sure that we have options and plans in place with our campus police or local police, depending on where the event is. What are we going to do if something happens? And I usually say not if, I usually say when. What is the protocol? How do we make sure our students are safe if, there's a counter protest, or if people, I hate to say that people expect the chatter and the verbal, comments and whatnot, but what do we do if it gets physical? What do we do if someone starts to move closer? What are the boundaries? Do we have the physical boundaries in place to ensure that it won't get physical? And then how much is enough security when it comes to actual law enforcement on the ground? Are 2 officers enough? Or, do we have people on standby at that local PD ready to respond? So it's all planning. And it's unfortunate that we have to do that, but that is what we do when it comes to physical security. Looking at a lot of these questions, I'll try to summarize this, and it's not going to be what people probably want to hear, but I'm going to be really honest from a law enforcement perspective. If there is not a criminal act, there will not be a prosecution. There will be open investigation. The federal agency, I can speak for us, FBI, my former employer, we work really, really hard to address hate crimes. We open every one of those. We work them diligently. If we can prosecute them, we will. Every U.S. Attorney's office that I've ever worked with is all in on prosecuting these types of crimes, but it's what is that and what does it look like and where's the difference between free speech, hate speech, what crosses the line into criminal activity? And that's where we can step in from a law enforcement perspective and actually try to pursue charges. I tell everyone all over the country, please make sure if there's an incident, no matter how small you may think it is, report it so that we have documentation, so that if there's a pattern of behavior, if we can show a student is escalating or taking more deliberate steps, and we can show this history, this long-standing behavior, then we have a much better chance at getting this person pushed through the legal system from a, accountability standpoint. So there's all these different lanes. I saw the question about campus administrators and have I tried to talk to those individuals. I'm law enforcement. I'm a security director. I don't have, I can talk to campus police and I can encourage campus police to try to have those conversations, but it's not truly my lane on someone else's campus to tell the administrators what to do. What I'd love to try to support is, I know all of our Hillel directors do a great job of trying to have that open communication, that constant dialogue with their administrators, with, people on their campuses to at least keep the conversation going instead of it getting shut down. And so that's kind of more the direction I go as a security director, because it's not quite my lane to go direct with administrators, but I'm always open to it. I've had meetings with administrators on campuses. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's been the campuses that are doing really well. And so I've met with them to see what is working and why is it working and how can I push this to other parts of the country to be as effective as you are. So those are the administrators that I have been able to get to meet with. But I'm only one person and I'm trying to get around to as many places as I can. So all great questions. It's challenging, but all we can do is try to plan and prepare. And then, I think for me, one thing I really care about, the mental health piece. I really care about our students and the impact that this has on them. And so, I get phone calls every day because there's incidents every day all over the country. And what I care about is, okay, if we can't do anything about this criminally, what can we do for our student? How can we make sure they're okay? How can we get them the support they need after the experience that they just, went through? So lots of layers, complicated, and I think that we're all coming together doing the best that we can to try to support each other, but it's definitely not easy.
I want to chime in, Amy. That like the piece of that the relationship with the administration is so critical, and sometimes you'll hear Hillel directors say all the time, we're in constant communication, but I want to provide the back end. What does that actually look like and feel like? Because it's not just a talking point in this statement, that relationship, of what that relationship is. It's about the connection to mental health resources. Through a university relationship with the administration, we actually brought in the mental health professionals to our Hillel to meet with Jewish students specifically, and it was paid for by the university. Because of the relationship with university administrators, we got to get their commitment to provide law enforcement at any time we needed it, free of charge. But that was because we were in relationship, and it wasn't a demand, it was a conversation, and it was an openness to learn together in this moment and how we can protect our Jewish students and our Jewish communities. The relationship with university administrators also looks like co-advocacy efforts, right? There are there's a lot of legal confusion that I alluded to earlier. What does it look like for a good Hillel and university to partner together to advocate to the Attorney General of our Commonwealth to provide clear and legal guidance to universities so that the General Counsel at the universities has that guidance to implement law and their code of conduct and their policies correctly. So the relationship piece is not just to make people feel good that we're doing it. It's actually to support our Jewish students. And even though it can't solve the issues, even though it can't stop a protest, even though it can't stop anti-Zionist voices on campus, our Jewish students know and feel that the work is being done. I hope to move the needle a little bit. Every Hillel director will say, like, our primary primary responsibility is supporting Jewish students. I think that's Carrie's responsibility. Like that's a Hillel professional's responsibility is to support. It's not a Hillel professional's responsibility to solve all these issues. Thank God we have amazing relationships with JCRCs, with the local and state elected officials who can help us in that effort. But our lane, right, is to make sure our students know of the support mechanisms in place, and our partnerships with those university administrators is a core component of that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that emphasis. And I think that one of the other things that is really key is to build that agency in students too, so that they begin to self-advocate and know that they can request those resources. And also, even it's been really exciting to see them start to advocate at the state level, at Date with the State and other important advocacy day, things like that, to see them leaning into leadership roles, like we just saw with Kira, right? To see them starting to think of themselves as Jewish leaders, not as Jewish student leaders, but as Jewish leaders too. So, it's interesting to also see how experiencing this is also driving development of those capacities too. It's a interesting sort of pairing. It's unfortunate, right, in a lot of ways, but there's a little piece of hope in that too for me also, that we're building. I'm someone who needs to find silver linings, that we're building new Jewish leadership in this as well. I want to pull a couple of questions still for us. I'm wondering if we could just linger for another second too. There are still a lot of questions about what happens for Jewish students who have spoken out about Israel. Is there backlash? What happens? Where do they find that support? I think we kind of know the answer as Hillel directors, but I think there's concern. And so maybe we can help folks feel maybe a little bit better about what that looks like if we talk about it from our experiences and what that looks like on our campuses. Truman, have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a range of responses, experiences, interest levels, all of that kind of thing. I can't say enough glowing things about our students during the past 5 months. Gosh, more than that now, 7 months, I guess. It feels awful to say that. But every single person on this call should know that the Jewish students that are at college campuses right now, and therefore the Jewish leaders of tomorrow, are brilliant and wise and mature and motivated, and so proud of their Jewish identities and of Israel and of the Jewish future here in the States as well. You should feel really positive about that, despite the darkness that's around us right now. There's a lot of light, and it's coming from these Jewish students. And with that said, right, we've had students, get their stories, their feelings, their emotions out in a variety of ways, right? That's, we generally, frankly, as a Hillel, do not find that direct counteraction, right? Counter protests when SJP is doing an action or something like that. We find that to be rather ineffective, right? It causes more controversy and concern rather than effective relationship building, message spreading, education opportunities, that kind of thing. And so we have had students do some incredible counter protest work in limited capacities. We're very glad to advise them in how to do it well, how to do it safely, maturely, responsibly. We work with the university to ensure that they know that they have, students that will be speaking up for pro-Israel causes at those events, and so that they need to, ensure that there's proper protection in free speech areas, all that kind of stuff. And we're proud of the students who are willing to put themselves out there and lead in that regard. And by and large, there have not been issues. There were actually initially in the fall, and then since then we really haven't seen as much. But we focus most of our response work in terms of one, educational programming, both for our students and for the wider community, right? I mentioned that we've worked with the university to put on a few events. We have had an incredible Springboard Fellow through Hillel International here, Rose Goldstein, who has done incredible programming around Israel education. Just last week, we had Ambassador Dennis Ross and Gaith Alamari here to speak with our students. Had over 60 students and community members here at the Brody Jewish Center to learn from two of the leading lights in the field of peace, reconciliation, optimism in this really difficult conflict. And so we were so thankful to have learned from them. We do, engaging learning courses, all that kind of thing. But it's a multifaceted approach. And I think what you'll hear from our students, if you were to have 3 UVA students on this call, and 3 JMU students on this call, they'd probably say the same thing, but they want spaces to have frank, difficult conversations with their peers that they feel isolated from, right? And we would love to do that, right? We've had some events and we've had some one-on-one conversations that we know have gone on between students and have been really positive and exciting and optimistic. And we would love, and we're looking to, in the fall, expand that to a larger community. There have been events that we've run that have had open registration in the past, right? And we've seen disappointing interest and engagement from the broader university community. And so I'm optimistic that our students will continue to advocate and educate in a way that brings those people in and engages them in a way that helps them meet them where they are.
I really love that. It brings me to something else that I want to kind of throw out because it ties to something that I think is just a larger question about, what are the larger academic efforts that we're seeing on our campuses right now of just educating the community about Israel, about anti-Semitism, about Judaism? What is that looking like as part of your work, as part of your Hillel, as part of your campus communities?
I from 3 to 5 p.m. today, I attended a panel sponsored by the university that for the first time in my experience this year seemed to present dual narrative in a way that made people both comfortable and uncomfortable at the same time. The difficulty in that, like it presented a voice that is pretty darn anti-Israel and anti-Zionist. So we had to hold that space in the moment in conversation with a Zionist and pro-Israel speaker and I actually do think that that message of 2 narratives presents again that invitation for nuance and dialogue in a way that college campuses are made for that. On the one hand, though, the issue is 50 people in a room out of a campus of 40,000, right? Like, so it's like, how do you move the needle? On the other hand, like you have to start somewhere. You have to have conversations and learn together. Jewish studies faculty are so committed to this work and our like at least at Mason is my partner, but like at many of our campuses are our partners in helping talk through how to deal with the academic world here. But I do think the commitment to learning and talking more is there. It is hard and so difficult and painful that a group of loud voices don't want to engage in that. And so that, as a Hill director, is my difficult moment of like, how do I deal with that? But I always say, like, how do you find the silent many in the sea of the loud few? I think that's the opportunity here with learning and education on a college campus, on all of our college campuses. Like, there are so many silent manys. Let's find them, let's work with them, let's talk with them, let's learn together to make our collective voice heard.
I'm going to totally steal that phrase from you, so watch out.
I just wrote it down. I'm doing the same thing.
You'll see it on my Instagram later this week.
I mean, like, let's be real, like, honestly, and maybe, I don't know, people can call me out, but when we think of, and when we see the noise and we see the social media posts, we often think like, oh my God, it's like a huge cruise ship of all these things, but it could perhaps just be a small rowboat, just really, really loud right now. And so how do we create multiple small, like, I don't know, that's the optimism here, Amy. Like, there's opportunities to build multiple rowboats.
You bet. Well, and I think we're hearing that from our students a lot, right? That the loud voices of the few, right, both on campus and off, are distracting and damaging their experience as college students and as Jewish college students, right? And we really need to find sustainable ways to activate those silent many that you talk about. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how our students do that at the end of this semester and going into the fall too, because I'm sure these conversations will continue throughout the year.
So I'm very aware that we're nearing the end of our time together. I have one final question before I hand this off to Betty Ann Levin, which is a question for all of us, or all of you. And I'm wondering, in each of your roles, if you're thinking about what support looks like for you, how can people support you? So there's lots of folks who want to support you, but it's not always done in meaningful ways, right? It can sometimes be very loud or very distracting, even if it's well-intentioned. And so what does that support look like for you, whether it's from alumni or parents or donors? What would meaningful support look like? So if folks on the call, in whatever role they're in, are thinking about how they might step up into a role because they care about the work that you're doing, how could they help you? $1 million, I know. So, but really.
Hello Global Giving Week is May 13th now. Okay. What's hard as a Hillel director to see, especially online, is when people make statements about our campuses or our Hillels or our Chabads or our Jewish communities, and it's only one part of a much larger story, right? And so I don't necessarily want your takeaway from what I'm about to say to be like, oh my gosh, like, it's only, Jewish life is booming and great at every campus, and that's true. And there's also difficult moments too, but we need our community to be partners in uplifting our success stories and the vibrancy of our Jewish communities and the resiliency of our students and the strength of our students, at the same time of acknowledging some of the difficulties of that moment. Just because there are SJP protests, in my personal opinion, doesn't mean it's a bad campus for Jews. So how can the community be in conversation with one another, connect people with the Hillel professionals on campuses so that we can learn collectively about the ins and the outs, the backdrops of what's happening, so that each campus can continue to thrive Jewishly while at the same time respond to this difficult moment, whether that's, I told Robin and Betty Ann, like, tag me as much as you want on Facebook so I can be in conversation with people, whether it's that or whether it's just, saying to people like, yes, and, right, this also exists. I think like painting that full picture can help, because what I'm actually really afraid of in this moment is that Jewish students won't go to some schools, and therefore the impact is that Jewish life on campuses could suffer as a result. And so let's partner together. Let's support one another via the stories, the narratives, the work we're doing, the collective action we're doing, the honesty of the moment, saying that things are a little dicey sometimes, and like we have great partners on the ground who are willing to jump on the phone with you to be in conversation. I think that's the moment we're in, and that's the way the communities can support us.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think a microcosm, well, it's not very micro, but an example of exactly what Daniel is talking about is the recent Anti-Defamation League campus anti-Semitism report card that was released recently last week, right? It is an attempt by the ADL to encapsulate Jewish life and campus environments and climates for outside observers and prospective families and the like, but it boils things down to a letter grade, which is really problematic, I think, in a lot of ways. I think it misrepresents the resiliency, beauty, and the vibrant nature of a lot of Jewish communities. And I'm bringing this up because the University of Virginia received an F, right? We received a failing grade. It's the first failing grade that most UVA students have ever gotten. It's not mine, by the way. I took calculus in college and it wrecked me. But it was shocking for us to see because that's not what we see every day when we come into the Brody Jewish Center here, right? We see thriving Jewish life with over 700 Jewish students coming to see our Hillel at least once a year, right? And then over 300 of them, coming back again and again and again, 6 or more times, or going on an immersive experience with us. So we have a thriving core of Jewish students that love being Jewish, love being in community with each other, love planning programs for each other, love the empowerment that Hillel provides and the Jewish community that UVA holds and has. And that's not to say that there's room for improvement, right? Like there are reasons behind that letter grade. And there are ways in which we think UVA can improve, and the ways in which you can support us through that is by sharing stories of the joy that the Jewish community has on this campus, right? If any of you on the call are on Instagram, like look up our Instagram and reshare some of our posts, or look us up on Facebook and reshare some of the posts. I promise when you go, you'll see our robust Passover schedule and students dancing at the matzo ball semi-formal that they had 2 weekends ago, which is a time-honored tradition that
I created when I was a student at UVA.
I was about to shout out, Daniel created that, right? So like there are long-standing traditions that allow Jewish students to be college students and be Jewish at the same time and love their experience. And so Hillel Global Giving Week is on May 13th. And so I'm kidding. Look, my mom always says, my mom has been in this work longer than I have in terms of philanthropic support and charitable work. There's 2 ways that are the most direct to support a nonprofit organization. It's time and treasure. And so with your time, I ask that you, amplify the stories that these Hillels are sharing of their Jewish students, right? Whether that's stories of resiliency in the face of this really, really hard moment, or if it's stories of Jewish joy when like our students held an Israel field day and played spike ball for 3 hours in the sunshine because it was a gorgeous day 2 weeks ago, right? Use your time to amplify those voices. If you have time, speak to prospective families in your area that had students interested in George Mason or ODU or UVA or Virginia Tech, or probably not Virginia Tech. We don't want to encourage people to go there. But encourage them and tell them that like, hey, I heard this awesome call with the federations that made it sound like a really wonderful place to be Jewish. And I met some of the directors and they seemed like joyous individuals, Daniel more than Truman, but they seemed great. And so I encourage you to use your time that way. And then of course, treasure, right? Hillels are one of the places that your dollars lead to direct impact on Jewish lives and Jewish students in a way that's really, really visible and really, really tangible in an immediate fashion, right? This isn't like donating to UVA generally where it goes into the endowment and they give you a thumbs up. Here we tell you about the impact you've had with your students. So of course your treasure as well is deeply meaningful to us. You can tell my background's in development work. Those are the 2 ways I think that I would love to put out there as ways you can support the Jewish campuses right now.
Carrie, what about you? How can we support the work that you're doing with SCAN?
To piggyback on all the giving and donating, I need to multiply myself by a lot. Please, somehow. No, it's we are trying to grow this program so that we just have a better just so that we're dividing the work and making sure that we're meeting all the needs of the Hillels, not just from a security standpoint, but we also do training and we do physical assessments of the buildings. And so we are definitely trying to make sure we meet all those needs. I think what's really important and just the message I would like to get out, and I can speak primarily from the federal system. I just want everyone who's on here to know that the U.S. Attorney's offices, the local FBI offices do take this work very seriously. And they, there have been a couple incidents since I've been in this role where I'm working directly with the FBI on cases to get them prosecuted, to get them investigated. And everyone is, like I said, everyone's all hands on deck and committed to the work. And so if I can just message that to everyone, please know that from a law enforcement perspective, we're doing our job. We're trying to do our job, and we'll continue to do that.
I'm gonna answer my own question with a tiny plug for small Hillels, for the tiny Hillels like mine that don't have a Hillel house or a full-time Hillel director, and say that one of the things that really helps us is work on our algorithm. So especially one of the questions that came in is, how can alumni support Jewish students on campus? When you share our posts, it has a huge impact for us because we have a very small footprint as a small Hillel, and that helps our posts show up in the algorithm, and it helps us put Jewish Joy out because it helps people see our posts and it lets people know that we exist. And small Hillels, that's how we get people to know that we exist. It's how other Jewish students find us on our large campus, and we gain traction, and we just want to put it out there for other people to find us and know what we're doing. And the other thing I want to say at the end is just all of this work that we're doing with the federations is in partnership. And I think there's just a huge amount of gratitude from all of us towards our federations. And there's really not enough gratitude or ways of saying it, but they support us in so many, many ways. And events like this, or all of the many phone calls that they take from us to sustain us, they are one of the biggest driving forces behind the work that we are doing and supporting us. So a special thank you from us to you. So Betty Ann, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Amy. And all of you have done such a wonderful job closing. I don't have anything left to say, but no, I am so inspired by all of you, Amy, Daniel, Truman, Kira, Carrie, everybody that participated tonight. So thank you so much for giving us the time. I'm really inspired. I'm honored to work with all of you. I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. And really for your engagement and your interest in this topic, this really important topic. I will say that, giving has been mentioned, generosity has been mentioned. It's because of the generosity of all of you, of our communities, that our federations are that we're able to support not only these Hillels that you've heard from tonight, but other Hillels around Virginia, and also to bring resources to all of our communities like Secure Community Network, to our communities and our campuses like SCN. And we're so fortunate to be able to do that. So I thank all the federations and JCRCs involved for partnering tonight, and for everything that you all do, that we all do every day, because collectively our voices are stronger together and we are all stronger together. So please stay tuned to communications from both your local federations, your JCRCs. Follow us on social media, stay in touch. As Daniel was making the point, tag people individually so that people can respond to your questions. Please check out our community resource pages on all of our websites. We have all collected many resources on both anti-Semitism, the Israel-Hamas war, and also our community responses to both of these topics. So again, thank you to everyone, and good night.